Star Wars recently announced a massive storytelling effort called The High Republic, which will tell a story of the Jedi in their prime around 200 years before The Phantom Menace. And even though there's a new group of villains called the Nihil in that story, I actually think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that the Sith will be a big part of this story as well. In this video, I want to talk to you about this wild theory I have that Darth Plagueis and some Sith gods will play a major role in the High Republic, and why I think Yoda has hidden this conflict from the archives and kept it a secret from even the Jedi of the prequel era. What's up, everybody? It's Josh. Welcome back to the channel. Do me a favor and use your Force Lightning to blast that like button like the Sith Lord you are, and let's get into this theory. So the High Republic was just announced, and even though there are a lot of criticisms of this announcement and what the future of Star Wars will be like, I actually think there's plenty of sweet possibilities for this era, including a secret conflict with the Sith that the Jedi have hidden from the records of the rest of the Republic, and even hidden from the Jedi of the prequel era. That's right, everyone. I think one of the coolest possibilities for this time period is the fact that Darth Tenebris, Darth Plagueis, and these rumored Sith gods could all be active. But wait, you might be saying at home, isn't it true that the Sith weren't seen for 1,000 years before Darth Maul reveals himself in The Phantom Menace? Well, I'm pretty certain that is not actually the case, and that there was this secret conflict that was kept under wraps, particularly by Master Yoda. Now let's talk about the evidence that the Sith will be a part of the High Republic in general, and the majority of this has to do with Darth Plagueis and Darth Tenebris. We know in canon that Darth Plagueis was the master of Darth Sidious, that he had been planning and scheming things for a long time in canon. We also know that he had a master before him, who in Legends was known as Darth Tenebris, and Tenebris, at least by name, was canonized in the Rise of Skywalker visual dictionary. This is in that same chapter that canonized Darth Revan and other ancient Sith, the Sith troopers that Palpatine had out on Exegol. They all had battalions that were named after ancient Sith beings, and one of them was Tenebris. Even though we're not sure how much of the Legends aspects of these characters will make their way into the new canon versions, we can safely assume that there will be a line of Sith existing in the shadows all the way from Darth Bane down to Sidious, and therefore, in some way or another, the Sith have to be around. They didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It wasn't as though some Jedi left the Order and went and discovered the ancient teachings of the Sith and decided to become Sith. No, as far as we know, Darth Plagueis and perhaps his master Tenebris, and maybe even Sith before that, were existing, hiding in the shadows. Darth Bane survived the purge or the war between the Jedi and the Sith Empire, and there had to be some Sith in the rule of two that had lasted from all the way back from Darth Bane to Sidious. We also know that there's sort of a hidden history of the Sith that the Sith cultists out on Exegol did know about. This comes from the visual dictionary as well, as it is stated that these ancient Sith names that were again given to the different battalions of Sith troopers were only known by the Sith cultists who existed on Exegol. So in some way or another, there are likely Sith hiding out from the Jedi during the era of the High Republic, likely at least two, as Master Yoda says at the end of Phantom Menace, always two there are, a master and an apprentice. But that's not the only evidence of the Sith being involved. There was also mention of Sith gods in the Zero.hu article, which did first break the evidence about the High Republic. And even though they did get the time period wrong, I'm willing to bet they got a lot of things right in that article, particularly the existence of the Sith gods. They said there would be ancient evils, Sith gods of sorts. And if you look at these images of the short High Republic trailer, there are these creepy looking images at the end of the trailer. It's worth noting that this is a part of the trailer where the narrator has just asked, "What scares the Jedi?" talking about how that was the impetus for this entire project. The narrator then says, "Something wicked this way comes," which is actually a line from a witch in the play Macbeth. Now, Reddit user Erosaid posted this the other day, and I found it really interesting, especially this image here, which looks way too much like Abeloth for me to ignore. Now, before all the EU fans that didn't like Abeloth jump down my throat, I do not think they are going to bring back the exact version of Abeloth from the expanded universe into the High Republic era. But just look at the tentacles and the way that her smile is sort of split up the side. It just looks way too much visually like Abeloth to ignore. I think certain aspects of the Abeloth character will be carried over, mostly the corruption and mental manipulation that she did. Now, let's talk about what we know of the High Republic era and what starts the major conflict for this big story. There is going to be an inciting incident, and it is described as a natural disaster of sorts that likely has to do with hyperspace. This was heavily teased by Charles Soule and different members of the High Republic writing team during the announcement. And in general, this is just a great way to sort of power down the Jedi. Remember, this is the Jedi in their prime, and so if they're even more efficient than the prequel era, we have to have something that sort of down powers them and makes it so that they have conflict that's difficult for them to overcome. I think whatever this event is, it's going to literally pull different Jedi out of hyperspace, as has been teased in some of the descriptions for the upcoming books, and it'll leave the Jedi spread out. They won't be able to travel as easily, and I'm assuming they won't be able to communicate as easily either. Within that kind of a setting, with those sort of restrictions on their movement and communication, I think the Jedi Order would be ripe for manipulation and corruption. When I personally think of the question, what scares the Jedi, I think of the fear of losing their connection to the Force or learning that they were wrong about the Force. Here's the official description or logline for the Light of the Jedi novel, which is the book that will kick off the entire High Republic event. It says here, 200 years before the events of Star Wars: The Phantom Menace, in an era of the glorious High Republic, the noble and wise Jedi Knights must face a frightening threat to themselves, the galaxy, and the Force itself. A frightening threat to themselves, the galaxy, and the Force itself. Well, threatening the Force and the galaxy itself does sound a lot like Abeloth from Legends to me. I can assume if the Jedi felt like the Force was fighting back against what they were trying to do, or perhaps they were losing their connection to the Force, or some of them were even being corrupted and controlled and literally mutated by the Force, that would be absolutely terrifying. And so what I think is going to be happening in the main story of the High Republic is the Jedi sort of realizing that there's something combating or corrupting the Force itself. Now, they will probably, at least some of them, will probably assume this is coming from the dark side or the Sith, but the Sith are sort of in hiding, right? And as they have lost communication and the ability to travel, I think this would be a perfect opportunity for something like Abeloth to start coming into different parts of the galaxy and corrupting the Jedi. And whatever this threat is, whatever these Sith gods end up being, I do believe it will be slowly revealed that that is what is going on. I think at first there will just be combating of the Nile and them trying to figure out what is happening to the Force. And then eventually I think different groups of Jedi might start being corrupted. You might see Jedi turn on each other, might go to the dark side and become dark Jedi fighting against the real Jedi. And again, the line of Sith from Darth Bane will still be there. There will still be Sith in the galaxy somewhere, likely hidden from the Jedi, right? But as these characters are existing, it will be interesting if we find out that they were perhaps working with these Sith gods, or maybe controlled by the Sith gods, or maybe aided by these Sith gods. And this would be like a huge thing in canon. This was never talked about before. It would be an incredibly new thing to happen. And whether it's actually Darth Plagueis or Darth Tenebris or some other Sith that eventually passed down these teachings and these stories to the actual Sith leading to Plagueis, we know that this has to be a through line. It has to exist there because we know that Plagueis teaches Sidious everything he knows, and Sidious goes on to become the most powerful Sith ever and establishing the Empire and destroying the Jedi. Now, in order for this to have happened and to be as big of a deal as I think it is going to be, it would also have to be a massive cover-up by the Jedi. And this is where it gets really interesting for me because, yes, Yoda is around during this time. This is one of the benefits of him being so old and it being a totally new era. It does through line to Master Yoda, just like it through lines to Darth Plagueis and to Sidious. And so, if this thing is as big as I think it will be, it's going to be this massive thing that is covered up by Yoda and some other Jedi, possibly even hidden from the Republic itself. You see, if you go back to the conversation with the Jedi Council regarding Qui-Gon Jinn fighting Darth Maul on Tatooine, there's this comment made by Master Mundi where he says, that's impossible. The Sith have been extinct for a millennia. But then Mace Windu says, I don't think the Sith could have returned without us knowing. And Master Yoda says, difficult to see, the dark side is. At the end of that movie, with just Mace Windu and Master Yoda just looking over the now burning body of Qui-Gon Jinn, they confer with each other that there's no doubt that Darth Maul was a Sith warrior. Yoda then says, always two there are, a master and an apprentice. This is a very important scene and one that could get new context if what I think is going to happen in the High Republic actually happens. You see, it's very possible that someone like Master Mundi had no idea of the actual stories of the High Republic Crusades, where the Jedi actually fought against Sith and Sith gods to remove them from the known galaxy. We know that there are restricted parts of the Jedi archives, and we also know that histories have been lost before because of the Nile, or at least that's what the explanation is in now canon, that histories were destroyed with raids by the Nile. But I don't think it's going to be just the Nile. I think it's going to be the Jedi themselves. I think they will realize that if people knew, particularly Jedi, knew that there were these Sith gods out there that could corrupt them through the Force, they would be afraid of that. It could perhaps make them not want to be Jedi. It could perhaps make certain Jedi want to go out and find out about the Sith gods and explore more of the dark side. It is essentially a path for the Jedi to continue to be corrupted. And so perhaps Yoda and whatever Jedi make it out alive after this crusade decide, we are going to cover this up. We are going to keep this from the Jedi and from the Republic forever, because if we don't, it will do nothing but cause fear, which leads to anger, which leads to suffering. It could also undermine the authority of the Jedi if it were to come out that there were these actual Sith gods and that they didn't eliminate the Sith, and it could come out that they were corrupted and possibly did horrible things. I mean, what if some of these Jedi in the High Republic get corrupted by these Abeloth-like Sith gods and then slaughter entire planets of people? That's very bad. That's bad PR for the Jedi, and that would likely be covered up as well. I think this is really interesting, and it could perfectly explain how Yoda knew about the Rule of Two, how he knew exactly who Darth Bane was when he meets him in the Clone Wars, and it could just also explain why the Jedi of the prequel era are the way that they are. Super stringent, very restrictive on emotions, very closed down. Perhaps a lot of the things that led to the prequel era Jedi happened because of conflict that went down during the High Republic era. A great hidden crusade that the Jedi had against these Sith gods. And it could also explain what Exegol is exactly and why there's such history of the Sith out in the unknown regions of this galaxy. It's likely because the Jedi Crusaders of the High Republic area banished these Sith gods and whatever Sith remained away from the known galaxy. It's a wild theory, I know, but I think it would add a lot of juice to the High Republic era, and it would recontextualize what Yoda's responsibility was during the High Republic era and during the prequels. He's hiding this big secret from the rest of the galaxy, and that could possibly have led to the Jedi's eventual downfall. I would absolutely love this, and I would absolutely love it if Tenebris or Darth Plagueis was involved in what was going on. If they had knowledge of this thing, that would be awesome and add a lot of juice to the new canon and the history of the Sith in the new canon from the High Republic era all the way to Darth Sidious. Make sure you let us know what you think about this wild theory in the comment section below. And now let's shout out Michael Ogle. Indeed, it was Abeloth that was the mother of Mortis. So shout out to you, Michael. And now let's ask another nerd card question before we get out of here. I want to know, what alien race was Darth Tenebris in Legends? Answer that question in the comment section below. As I always say, I hope you're having an awesome and a nerdy day, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching this video. The Den of Nerds is independent media. If you want to support us, you can do something as simple as liking or sharing this video. If you want to financially support us, you can join the list of names you see below and become a supporter of us on Patreon. We also do live streams all week, Monday through Friday, over on our live streaming channel. Support independent media. Support the Den of Nerds.